Want to invite people is into an expansiveness of understanding what liberation means, because yes, yoga is about liberation, but that who is defining that liberation? And are we only siloing a certain worldview by focusing on only one stream of thought, rather than expanding our worldview and saying that there is this whole array of thought?
Welcome to a Curious Yogi podcast. I'm your host, Bobby, joined by living masters and awakening friends. We're here to illuminate your practice as we explore what it means to walk the yogi's path, unfold peace from within, and live the vision of oneness. I'm so delighted you're here. Now let's get curious. Welcome back to a Curious Yogi podcast, everybody. So nice to be back here with you. And I just want to start this episode by sincerely thanking all the beautiful people and friends and yogis and listeners that reached out after my last episode where I expressed I'd been going through a hard time, and then I sent a newsletter about questioning peace. And I just feel so thankful to know that the ups and the downs of someone on a spiritual path can be as tumultuous as someone that's not on a spiritual path, but it feels like so heartwarming to know that we're in it together, if that makes sense. So super appreciative for this community, super appreciative for the Satsang Sunday community. If any of you listening are interested in joining our monthly Satsang, where we study or discuss topics, concepts, ideas, episodes, and then we meditate together. And we just have built up such a really wonderful group of curious yogis. So if you're interested in joining us, please go on over to patreon.com/a curious yogi podcast. So I have another wonderful episode for you with a wonderful yogi and author named Anjali Rao. Angela brings intersectional and decolonial feminist lens to the study of philosophy and yoga history, integrating storytelling, art, and poetry. So she just launched or released a new book, I think actually yesterday. It's called Yoga as Embodied Resistance, a feminist lens in caste, gender, and sacred resilience in yoga history. So we discuss a lot about what she discusses in her book, and as well as her own journey into yoga. She really touches on the cultural and historical context of yoga and the themes of gender and caste within the practice. Uh, yeah, it still was a really illuminating conversation just to be reminded of how broad yoga is. And she says it's not a monolith, it's so diverse. There are so many teachings and commentaries and interpretations and developments, and um, just being able to hold paradoxes in our understanding of yoga and its teachings. So I love this conversation, a little bit shorter than usual, but I think we pack it all in. So I'll be super curious to hear what you think. So be sure to drop a comment, share on Instagram, and just keep engaged. Keeping engaged keeps those podcast hosts alive. I'll say that again. You keeping engaged keeps the podcast hosts' hopes alive, because yeah, sometimes one can think you're just sitting here behind a mic sharing the things you think are interesting, but then to be reminded there's others out there is wonderful. So I really love this contextual episode and the thought provoking research that Anjali presents. And also, you can hear her passion for and her curiosity for the subject matter, which I think applies to all of us. And if we practice yoga, if we study yoga, and especially if we teach yoga, we do have a responsibility to be informed, to hold that which we know and understand and that which we don't know or working towards knowing. So that's where I'm at today. And I hope you enjoy this conversation and I will see you on the other side. All right. So, welcome, Anjali, to Curious Yogi podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Bobby. So wonderful to be here with you.
It's amazing. And I do, as I was just saying before we started recording, I just want to congratulate you on your book that's coming out in a few days. I had a chance to read through the excerpts and some of the initial responses and reviews, and it seems like it's going to be really successful and something that the yoga world needs. So, big congrats.
Thank you. It's been a long time in the making. It's been germinating and for a long time, so I'm excited and kind of nervous too for it to be out in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, like kind of have birthing a child and you put so much love and energy into it. And that's actually like where I would love to start because when I was, learning about you and researching and hearing you talk and speak and you have such a scholarly lens and you're such a obviously intelligent dedicated lover of yoga and also like you have an interesting story. I know that you came to yoga as a breast cancer survivor and I'm just like before we get into the context of the book and everything, I'd love to hear a little bit like your story, what brought you to yoga. And furthermore, it's one thing to come to yoga as a healing tool from cancer, but then to go down the road of scholarly writing and where you are now.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month here in the United States, where I am. So it's particularly important and poignant for us to refer that as well. Yes, like you mentioned, Bobby, I did come to yoga at the age of maybe 30, in my 30s, right after I was a I was a young cancer diagnosee. Um, and early stage breast cancer. I think around 37, I was diagnosed. So I came to yoga as a physical sort of a tool to gain upper body strength after a double bilateral mastectomy. Um, and I fell in love with it. It was my first class, and I thought there's something that shifted for me emotionally and physically. I could feel some sort of, I don't know, some sort of a connection. And I grew up in India and I practiced yoga before, but I really never liked it. I thought it was very boring. I'm a student of Indian classical dance, and that was always my connection to the physical body and the emotional aspect and the spiritual aspect, if you will. So, but yoga never really moved me. But that one first class, I knew that I wanted it to be in my life, and I wanted to even teach it to other people going through cancer. So I went to my teacher and I said, "Hey, I want to learn. I want to learn. This is my first class, and I want to learn. And more importantly, I want to teach it." So she was very sweet. She's like, that's really great that you want to teach. You should just come to the next class. Like, just come to the second class and then we'll talk. So, anyway, long story short, I went to many classes. Yeah, of course, practiced for at least a year or two. And then I did my first, second 200 hour with the same studio that I was, practicing at. And then I met one of my mentors and now a friend who who used to teach yoga for people with cancer in Stanford Hospital. And I was like, this is what exactly what I want to do. So I kind of followed a apprentice and studied how to teach yoga for people with cancer. Um, got some experience there, and then I went to my 300 hours and continued practicing, continued teaching, continued sharing it in hospitals and uh, basically cancer care treatment. So that was like my focus for yoga teaching And while I was doing that, I also realized that a lot of things have shifted for me personally, mentally, emotionally. I kind of felt it was not just physical body and shoulder mobility, but there was something else happening. And that got me curious. And philosophy has always been very interesting to me personally. And the more I studied it, the more I realized that so much of it is a part of the culture that I come from, which is from India. Like so many of the texts were a part of my cultural tradition, my spiritual tradition. Um, and that got me thinking and studying philosophy. And I started teaching philosophy as the years went on. And then COVID happened, everything kind of shut down. So everything kind of moved online. Got to connect with so many different people online, got to study more online with people all over the world. I mean, COVID was devastating in in all the ways, but it also connected us to an online community of yoga practitioners, which I then got to be a part of. Um, and as I was studying it, I also realized that there are so many threads of caste and patriarchy which are not really addressed. I couldn't find any answers to the questions of, um, why are some texts looking at women as impediments to spiritual liberation, right? And how is that how do we reconcile that with the modern contemporary yoga space where we enter a yoga studio and it's mostly women, right? So it's
Mm.
such a stark contrast, and there is so much paradox there. So it kind of got me like really digging in, and I'm a nerd, and I'm just basically a nerd. So I just started researching, and it was also started because I saw a Instagram post by a white man yoga teacher who I really liked and who I studied from anatomy, and he said that it was the West who sort of liberated the women to practice yoga. And I was like, look, he would never say such a thing with just for sensationalism, because I liked him, I respected him. So that got me thinking, and I was like, is this really true? And where are the women practitioners? Where are the where are the gender expansive folks? Um and I got researching because again I'm a nerd, and I started studying from different textbooks, not of yoga, but like religious studies and gender studies and intersections of gender and religion, but nothing to do with yoga, right? So I was like, okay, there's definitely something here that I need to kind of look into and start gathering and collecting information from. At the same time, I knew that there was a thread of a very strong, or many strong threads of caste, which is not really mentioned in yoga textbooks, like as in problematizing it, right? In modern textbooks, not really. Nobody really talks about caste, and I was like, but it is such a strong um, factor in shaping Indic uh, society in general, which has again shaped yoga. So and Brahmanism, which is this casteist based religion, religious traditions and systems, are very much uh, formed, uh, or rather inform gender relations, which I talk about in the book. And how has all that shaped or continue to shape yoga? And I started studying and listening to people who are impacted by caste. I come from caste privilege, so I started listening to people who are impacted by caste, the Dalit folks, the Bhujan folks. Started reading more of uh, the historical texts of people who have abolished or tried to abolish and spoken out against Dalit liberation movements, like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, like Jyotirao Phule, like Galen Wyatt, and then in the more modern world, then Bodhisattva Rajan, Prachi Patankar. So I started working with them. I used to have a podcast, so I've invited a couple of them to, have such conversations. And I realized that there is a need for bringing together these different um, threads and really making it into like something which people practitioners can actually um, apply in their own lives, in their yoga practice, in their yoga spaces, and that's how it sort of was. The book was sort of germinated.
Wow, beautiful. It's so amazing, like how strong your curiosity has taken you to do this work, and also in recognizing the gap that's there for modern yoga practitioners, and allowing for the conversation and the dialogue to expand for us more than beyond just the postural yoga practice. And I was so excited about your book too, because I've found in my own study and love of yoga that so many of the commentaries and the scholarly books are from the lens of a male, whether it's Indian or a foreigner. That it's I'm excited to read the book because I think there are so many women yoga practitioners, and maybe you can speak to a little bit about why you think that is, and that to just be reading these, not only the postural books that are, many of the older books like from the Bihar School of Yoga and things, it's always a male depicted, but also when we're studying the deeper aspects of philosophy, that it's coming from that more male viewpoint. And I have, even in my study, wondered, where are the voices in the yogic text from women? Are they even there? Because it's not mainstream. So, maybe you can speak to, I'm asking a couple questions, but also I'm so curious, and I hope you can share some of the stories and the that you share in the book that can show us the place that women have, and also maybe speak also to casteism, and for those that aren't aware, how it impacts modern day yoga that we want to share and use as a tool for liberation and understanding the complexes and the nuances of it.
Yeah, well, okay, first let's just start with the first part of it because there are so many. Uh, so the first question you asked is where are the women and the right?
Yeah.
In these traditions. There are women and femme in some of the traditions, but the point here is that when we talk about yoga, what are we even referring to? Right? Are we
Mm.
talking physical part of it, which is a hatha yoga, which comes from like a more tantric sort of tradition, which talks about the body and the materiality as being very important, and transmutation of that into spiritual liberation, which is a whole different sort of stream of thought. And in that stream of thought and practice, there are women. In fact, tantra yoga is one of the most um, important, influential traditions where women practitioners, women teachers, women y- they were the ones who sort of uh, practiced it, taught it, led it. They have many lineages of it. There were gurus who were women practitioners. So in tantra there are not so much in, even if they were in ascetic traditions, there are very few of them as far as we know. The Vedas have a few mentioned who have, and I've talked about this, people who have, Vedas have rishis who have composed certain parts of the Vedas. But the point here is we're not really looking at what we call as exceptional histories. We're not looking at, oh, okay, these 527 or 27 rishikas who have composed Vedic hymns, because that is important for us to acknowledge, but that is really not delving into the society which was slowly gaining uh, uh, different stratifications based on caste, and also a more patriarchal uh, way of life, in which, when by patriarchy I mean the men were in control of land, of resources, of spiritual traditions, uh, of thought, of government. So men were more in the forefront and the center of society. So that's what I mean by patriarchy.
Mm.
During the Vedic times, this had already started sort of being established. So yes, we do have women rishikas, who ascetics, who have composed some of the hymns of the Vedas, but that really doesn't give us insight into the society that was existing. There have been like maybe 27 out of thousands of people who have composed the Vedas, because the Vedas are huge and huge corpus of teachings, right? And similarly in the Upanishads. So during that time, we have one particular stream, which is the Brahminical stream, uh, in which the patriarchy was already sort of embedded within the system. And every, history is so complex that every single time you say something, there will be a contradiction to it. So we have to be very wary. That's why I do not like generalizations of any kind. Everything has a contradiction, right? So yes, it was extremely patriarchal, and yes, there were rishikas who also composed some of the hymns, right? So things like that. And as time went on, I'm saying sometime around the 6th century onwards, we have what we call as tantra yoga coming in, and rather not tantra yoga, but tantra practices coming in, out of which emerged hatha yoga, which is this whole body practice, mind body practice. So in the book, I talk about not so much about hatha yoga. That's not my focus. I have talked about some of the big sort of periods where I consider like sort of big important periods where some of the uh, oh, developments of yoga took place.
Hmm.
And one is in the Upanishads, and each of these periods I have highlighted a specific figure. Some of them are ahistorical, and some of them are historical, right? Because in India, or rather Indic traditions, history is uh, it's called itihasa, that which happened, and that's like this whole amalgamation of um, myth and storytelling and historical references. Like it's all sort of mixed up because they were all oral traditions, and as time went on, different regional influences kind of got absorbed into the system. So that's another thing, right? So each of these stories are pertaining to specific periods or developments in which I think there has been sort of rebellion against or questioning of dominant culture. I've shared one from the Upanishadic period, and the Itihasic period, the Puranic period. Puranas and Itihasa are, for example, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. Those are the two big main epics. So I talk about one of the figures from one of the epics, and then the other two are from the bhakti movement, um, uh, where now that is one place which I feel like the women, the gender expansive folks, really pushed back against caste, against patriarchy, against class, against all sort of societal norms. And I feel is like a really an important one for us to kind of highlight in yoga, especially when we're talking about feminist resistance. And it's my favorite thing to highlight and talk, because it is about really doing away with hierarchies, disrupting hierarchies of the time, right? I mean, we cannot impose our present day thinking on the past, but of the time. So those are the different stories, and the last one is actually a Muslim practitioner. I wanted to kind of bring in that perspective as well, because she is again pushing back against, as you will read, so many different kinds of boundaries of class and caste and religion as well. So it's a really very intriguing sort of story. So that is the thing about women in yoga. So I've really not talked much about hatha yoga as much, because that's not my focus. My focus is on Upanishadic period, as well as um, Puranas, and then Puranic period, and then the Bhakti period onwards, right? So four, I think I've done four stories, four big stories. Um, so that's one question about caste. So ever since the Indo-Vedic people, and I talk about who they are and how that matters to the story of yoga, ca- sort of came in and migrated and integrated within this this region of South Asia, which is Afghanistan, parts of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, where many of the roots of yoga, contemporary yoga, lie. Um, they brought in a social stratification system, which we call it caste now in the modern world, but it was called the Varna system, which is a sort of a class system based on division of labor. And then that was sort of legitimized in some of the texts, like the Upanishads, like the Bhagavad Gita, and the Manusmriti, and so many different texts. Then sort of legitimized this system in different ways. And what it was is it created a system of hierarchies, placing Brahmin and Kshatriya on the top, and then the Vaishya, the Brahmin and Kshatriya are the scholar and the priest, and Kshatriya are the warrior, the ruling caste class, and then we have the Vaishya, the landowner, and then we have the Shudra, the person who's the laborer, and then outside this four varna system, we have the avarnas, the people who are now called Dalit and the Bahujan, and different other tribes of the land. So this was a system, and it was not just a hypothetical sort of abstract concept. It actually impacted material lives of the people. Um, and as time went on, as more complexity came into the society because of trade, because of migration, because of urbanization, uh, because of more sophisticated occupations coming in, there were formation of guilds and formation of what we call as jati, which are these endogamous units within the bigger varna system. That's the jati. Jati means by birth. So people of the jati would marry within that jati and have children within that jati. So it created a sort of a rigidity of and where there was not much social mobility between people. Right now, how does that matter to yoga? Most of the texts which were in Sanskrit, which yoga now consider as important yoga texts, were not accessible to to people who are not from either the two dominant castes or the three dominant castes, and not so much with the other Shudras and the Avarna folks, right? So, in fact, not only that they were not accessible, they sometimes legitimized the class and the caste system, right? And then colonization came in, and colonization again complicated this whole situation because colonizers, especially the British, Portuguese, the French, they looked at this vast array of, mind-boggling array of different traditions, different belief systems. There were people worshipping the Devi, there were people worshipping Krishna, there were people who were atheists, there were people talking hundreds of languages and dialects. So they were like, how are we going to like govern, administer, and colonize India, and larger by India I mean India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, right?
Hmm.
Colonized state, or rather colonized provinces. And so they uplifted what they considered as the intellectual elite of the land, which is, according to them, the Brahminical literature, which is Upanishads and the Vedas and so on, right? They translated many of them into German and English, especially, and French. And so then that again created this thing that these were the Brahminical elite, and this was the central sort of corpus of teachings were the Vedas and the Upanishads, rather than that it was just some of the teachings, but there are so
Hmm.
many other ways of being and thinking and living that was not really addressed or amplified or even understood, right? um so yeah, I hope I answered that question.
Yeah. No, I think you laid the groundwork perfectly, and I think it's so good to not good, so essential to lay that foundation for those that are listening, that are studying, whether it's yoga in the sense of how, what is considered yoga in the West is like you said, this big generalization pot, and it's so interesting to hear you say, like, actually, this is what my area of focus is, on the Upanishads, on the Vedas, and actually understanding like that there is a much broader context when we think about yoga, because many people that are listening to this podcast, they are interested in yoga philosophy, they are interested in meditation and the more subtle practices, but it's like it's important, I think, for us to realize how we got here. And I think it's also so interesting when you talk about the Sanskrit language, which it's kind of known everywhere that that's the language of yoga. And maybe you can speak a little bit too about how even that has been excluding or even oppressing other groups, and just speaking a little bit about that and bringing the awareness to it, because everybody, generally I'm speaking, has this sense that yoga is for liberation because it is, and dot dot dot. I think that's where you come in.
Yeah, I mean, I want to emphasize that Sanskrit is one of the important languages of yoga. I will not cancel Sanskrit. I have nobody to cancel an ancestral language, you know. Um, and also that there is a complex history to it that not many people know or are aware of because of colonization, because of Brahmanism. And so we have to consider that Sanskrit is an important language, and it's not the only one, you know. So there are so many regional languages that have probably different worldviews. If you read the literature of those languages, there are probably different worldviews. And yes, for people who are non-Indians and non-South Asians, you can read the translations of those. There are some excellent translations of different texts, different regional languages texts. So want to invite people is into an expansiveness of understanding what liberation means. Because yes, yoga is about liberation, but that who is defining that liberation? And are we only siloing a certain worldview by focusing on only one stream of thought, rather than expanding our worldview and saying that there is this whole array of thought? In yoga, when we talk about philosophy, we usually mean the sutras, the Yoga Sutras, or we mean, if we are more sort of rigorous, then we probably bring in some Upanishads and some Bhagavad Gita. But that's not the only thing. Those are not the only things. Yoga Sutras was um, devised as a sort of ascetics, because in the end we are talking about the goal of yoga according to Patanjali is kaivalya, liberation, right? Liberation from what? Liberation from attachment. Attachment to what? Attachment to Prakriti, which is manifest nature, pure consciousness, which is untouched by any sort of identification with creation, material nature. It's a very, very different way of thinking as compared to Tantra, which is Tantra is saying everything is sacred, every material is sacred, every part of our body and every experience of our life it can be sacred. So it's a very different sort of a worldview. So what is happening now in the contemporary world, and it's because of many different reasons, including colonization, that and capitalism, that we are bringing together these different, very divergent threads of thought. This Yoga Sutra is talking about Purusha Prakriti, and then we have Hatha Yoga imposed on it, and then we have, some parts of Bhakti in it. Like there is this nice little hodgepodge of things that we are doing without really understanding where the roots are coming from. Yoga is not a monolith, it never really was.
Hmm.
And it never really was this um one tradition. It was rather a amalgamation, a composite, a tapestry of so many different traditions, and that's something not very much understood. So that's why in my second, I think it's my second chapter. You're right. um I think it's my second chapter when I talk about is what is yoga Hindu, and then I talk about what that actually is a two-part question, because it says what is yoga and who is a Hindu, right?
Hmm.
So I try to problematize it, not because I want to confuse people or to overwhelm people, but to really clarify, because there is so much of misunderstanding and sort of confusion about these things. So my objective is to really clarify, and also to say things are far more interesting and far more complicated, and it's fun and it's important for us to understand these complications.
Hmm. Wow, great, beautiful. I'm so excited to read the book when it comes out. Um, Yeah, I think it is complicated. And I when I'm hearing you speak, and obviously there's so much history there, which, you know, I'm sure even for a South Asian, it's so much. And then when you think of those that are coming at it outside of a culture which is not even our own, and I see the importance, and I see that why something like your book is so essential. And then I want to ask you, and then how do we bring that vast history into the context of now? Even the name of your book, Yoga as Embodied Resistance. Like, if we ever needed embodied resistance, it's right now. So how do we sort of bridge those worlds, if you will, and do so with respect and appreciation for the history and the complexity and diversity of it? It seems like a
That's a
big
really,
job.
that is a really good question. That's a big question. And what I try to do in the book is to really offer practical takeaways and applications, so that, yes, I'm sharing all this history and it's great to know the history, but what does that really mean for me right now? Like, how does this impact not only my practice of yoga, but in a larger way, how does this impact me as a person of a collective, me as a person of a community? I've really tried to kind of address those things in the book, because I honestly believe that we need more and to address some of these complexities. And yeah, so the question that you shared, like, how do you even bridge these different, the histories to the present moment, is I have tried to draw those threads, you know I have tried to draw those threads between the past and the present, and also crystallize how the past has even informed the present. How we know who we are is based on the messages that we have received from the past, right? What we consider as a liberation, for example, or what we consider as fitness, or health, um, or anything, is based on what we think, what our data and information is based on the past, right? So to really deconstruct that is important. And I think in the world today, what we are all really struggling with is holding paradoxes, right? And so I really want to invite people to hold paradoxes, to build capacity, to hold complexity, and invite critical thinking and questioning. Question everything. Don't assume that this is how it is, because we really, that I think dominant culture all over the world is about flattening things, right? It's like homogenizing everything, but actually the beauty is of the human experience and creation is so diverse and wonderfully dimensional, and we need to kind of really tap into that, because right now human intelligence is sort of taken over by artificial intelligence and by flattening of human intelligence. Everybody is supposed to think alike, right? But
Hmm.
it never was. And my hope is that this will inspire people to really look into ways of being and thinking which are different from each other. So each of these stories have different sort of ways of looking at liberation, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and it does feel like that's the knowledge or the inspiration that we need at this time, when there's so much pulling us into that one way of thinking, or there's so much polarization, and exactly like you said, building capacity feels like where we need to be headed, whether it's with our practice or with our lives and the way that we show up in the, like you said, in the collective. And
Yeah.
I'm also wondering if you can speak a little bit, which I know you speak about in the book, is, as you're saying, gender expansive or non binary views. Like, how does that tie into the history and the modern context of where you are with the book? Because I also think that's such an important and interesting perspective to think about when we think about gender roles in history and in modern yoga.
Yeah. In fact, that's the whole point of the book, actually, because, um, as I started looking at where are the women in yoga history, I started looking at, oh, I have to really expand this question to so many other things. Like, why are we even thinking of binaries of gender, for example? What did yoga teachings and yoga, like within the context of yoga, what have been some of the narratives that have uh, resisted gender binaries, right? And who are the people who have resisted it, and how have they resisted it? So those are the questions that I have answered. I hope in the book, especially in the like almost every story of mine is about challenging either the gender norm of patriarchy or gender binaries. And in one, I directly addressed gender fluidity and what were some of the teachings of yoga when it came to gender. You know, so I do think that we have so much untapped uh, potential in just understanding about all the, just gaining understanding about all these issues, just by studying, these kind of narratives.
Mm. Yeah, and then like you said, then it does bring the capacity to take in more ideas and
Yeah.
expand our own reach as we in the here and now are resisting still the patriarchy, still capitalism, still uh, j- uh, misogyny and homophobia and trans, and it's kind of coming at it from all angles as I'm sure you're probably so researched at as it has been for many, many years and in
Thank
all
you.
of history.
Yeah.
So it feels important, but also then, and I'm kind of just thinking of it from the other angle, then it kind of also feels like if it's always been sort of yoga as a tool for this embodied resistance or as a way of resisting that, which is, it seems like, okay, patriarchy was there back when they were writing the Upanishads, then it must be there in another 1,000 years. So what are we to do about it?
Yeah, no, I think that there definitely have been strides, right? Let's not give in to despair. Though I know the word right now,
Okay, thank
in
you.
the United States, it's like it sounds dire and it feels dire. But I think it was Angela Davis, the black feminist leader, who said that, we have to think that we can change the world, and we have to keep doing things as if we can change the world, right? Even though we are against some sort of insurmountable things right now.
Mm,
uh, but we have to continue doing that, because what is the choice that we have, right? We cannot we cannot just give in to despair, not for ourselves and not for the future generations. And I really hope that some of these stories, some of these questions that are shared in the book, and will also open doors for other people and say, hey, you know what, this book has inspired me to look at this in a certain way, and I'm going to research it, and I'm going to get a new information, and now I'm going to uh, challenge gender norms and race and caste and all of the things, all the different hierarchies that exist. So I mean, we just have to create those ripples of thought and action, and continuously do that in our communities, in our whatever way and is accessible to us, right?
mm. Right. And it does seem like something as sort of timely as your book now and just the times that we're living in. It does seem inspiring that it gives us another tool or another opening to ask uncomfortable questions. And I think that is about, of course, us as the individual, but us as yoga practitioners or teachers or whatever role you want to play in the yoga world, yoga spaces. Like to have the uncomfortable dialogue, it seems also now is the time, and also with all those things you mentioned like caste, racism, and the list goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. There's no time like today to
Yes,
start.
so that will be the plug for people to get the book, which comes out in the next few days. So by the time this episode is posted, it will be out, and I'll definitely share the links for people to get your book and um for
We'll
us to,
also be
yeah.
doing,
Mm,
I will also be doing a reading circle on the 24th onwards.
okay.
Probably the only one I'll do. Uh, Definitely the only one this year. for the book, and it's just going to be people reading the book together. We're going to reflect on some of the things together, just process it together. That's on the 24th, and they're done over 4 sessions of 2 hours. It's all on my website. And I invite for those folks who like processing it community to join us for that.
Okay, I'll definitely put that link in the show notes there. And just to wrap up, I want to ask three final questions for you
Oh,
before we go. Quick
we
fire
wrap up with me.
questions.
Okay.
Yes. You try to, in the podcast world, try to be slightly different. So the
Okay.
first one is at this point in your practice, in your study, is there anything that you're still curious about?
Oh my God, all the time. I don't think
Okay.
I've ever been. I think I hope I never stop being curious. I think even on my last day, I want to die curious. um, yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm right. So I'm doing my PhD right now. I'm in my second year, and I'm really looking at some researching some of the um, I want to say indigenous traditions of my ancestral land, which is in coastal Karnataka in India,
Oh,
and
nice.
which kind of really challenged gender and patriarchy. So that's I don't know whether that will be my dissertation yet, but I definitely am very interested in that.
Wow,
And
amazing.
material
Super.
religion. That's the second one which I'm really interested in.
Which
Um,
religion?
materiality
Material.
of religion. So like looking at fabric, looking at music, all the things like um food, to really look at some of the aspects of lived religion. That's something really that intrigues me and sounds fascinating to explore.
Wow, interesting. So interesting. Okay, the next question is in your practice or in your life, a great Mahavakya that's been inspiring you or continued to come up, a great saying, a great inspiration.
Oh my goodness. Mahavakya, I can only look at like think of like Upanishads, which is like Aham Brahmasmi, like I am one. I don't know whether I'm that, but I definitely, oof, this is a hard one. What are some of the things? I think to continue to ask questions, to
Mm,
continue to be curious. I cannot stop stressing that enough, and to not despair, because right now
mm,
we are. And I think the only way we can get through this situation is with each other. And that love is a verb.
beautiful. I love that. And then the last question, if you can sum up this conversation in one sentence. Fun, great. And I would even say yoga as embodied resistance. That is like, I
Thank
think it's amazing. So thank you so much, Anjali. I know you've been super busy, and I just appreciate you taking the time to share, all the excitement around your book. And you have so much knowledge, and I'm sure I'm going to put everything in so people can reach out and find you on your website and Instagram and just make sure to get a copy of your book. So thank you so much.
thank you, Bobby. Thank you for making the time and staying up late and where you are at. So I really appreciated this conversation.
Nice. I'm just going to stop the recording now and then. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider supporting the show at patreon.com/a curious yogi podcast. And please leave a review. It really helps the show reach more people. Let's stay curious, connected, and keep walking the path together. In total delight, this is Bobby signing off until next time.